If you've been following along in the world news, something happened within the last week that kind of shocked a lot of Americans and really a lot of the world stage. Benjamin Netanyahu reelected as prime minister. Earlier, I had the opportunity to sit down and talk to BIBI. Watch. With me now is the newly reelected prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. First of all, congratulations, Mr. Prime Minister-elect. As Israel's longest-serving leader, how do you assess this moment?
Well, it's a critical moment, obviously, because we're at the cusp of a great change in the world, technologically, politically. But Israel is also at a great point because it's become a rising power in the world. And I see, at least my missions, is threefold. One, to block Iran's quest for nuclear weapons. Second, to dramatically expand the circle of peace that we had with the historic Abraham Accords, 4 peace treaties with 4 Arab states, which we did 2 years ago. I would like to basically bring it to a historic end of the Arab-Israeli conflict, not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but with the Arab world, and I think that's doable. And third, to continue to build Israel's power in innovation and technology to make it a force among the nations and a great boon to humanity. And that is that. These are the 3 missions. I have 25 others, but suffice these 3.
During your last term, you stood almost alone on the world stage, pointing out the dangers that Iran poses to Israel and the West. In fact, you discussed that in your book. How have things changed in 2022?
Well, they've changed dramatically because I think that the tragic events in Iran, the subjugation of the Iranian people, the terrible violence inflicted on Iranian women, their incredible courage going to the streets of Tehran and the other cities of Iran, that has basically torn off the mask of this regime that was pretending to be something it wasn't, through various diplomatic maneuvers and charm offensives and so on. Now the whole world can see what this horrible regime is about. And people now ask themselves, do we want these cruel ayatollahs and mullahs to have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to every city in the world? And the answer is categorically no. I think that's changed, and I'm glad about that. But the task of blocking them from getting these weapons of mass death that could terrorize the world still remains before us. So I rightly, I think, called it my first task.
Right. You know, you're going to be tasked with forming a new government. Are you confident now with all that's happened that you can bring all these diverse parties together?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm confident we can do that. I've had a lot of practice. Remember, this is
you have
6th government that I'm forming, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And you ran an amazing campaign. How did your time out of office help with where you are now?
Well, first of all, it gave me something very valuable for which I'll be forever grateful. It gave me a year in which I could write this book that we're discussing right now. There's no way that I could write that book while I'm in office. So I'm grateful for that. It also gave me time to, as you write the book, think about your life. You think about the lessons that you gleaned from the various experiences, and you think about what you want to do with the rest of it. And I've had time to do all of it, and I put most of it in my book.
Yes, and it is an indeed great, wonderful book, Benjamin Netanyahu, BIBI, My Story. I have a question for you, Prime Minister. What is the one thing that you want Americans to know about Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, Americans specifically, that you have no better ally than Israel, and that through thick and thin and through changing administrations, Israel, I believe, is the best ally of the United States, just as I believe that the United States is the best ally of Israel. That's the most important thing. And I, as the Prime Minister of Israel, deeply believe it, even though I've had my share of disagreements with American presidents. That fundamental understanding is ironclad.
And I believe most of America watching tonight agrees with you with their support for Israel. On election night, you were emotional when you were talking about the sacrifices that your family has made. How do you reconcile those sacrifices against the political assault that you've experienced over the last 30 years?
Well, I think it's a question of something that animates the book, and that is you live a life of purpose, at least I have. My purpose was to do everything I could to assure the security, prosperity, and permanence of the one and only Jewish state. That was the purpose that I've been devoting my life to and will devote my next term in office to as well. When you live a life of purpose beyond yourself, it gives you tremendous resilience and force to overcome very difficult conditions. Israeli politics is not gentle. All politics is cruel. Sometimes Israeli politics is crueler than most. So unless you share this vision with your family and with yourself, then I would say there's no point in political life, because power by itself is useless and boring and uninteresting, and not worthy. But if you live a life of purpose, then you can overcome even dreadful odds.
Excellent. The world calls it the West Bank. Bible believers call it Judea and Samaria, because almost every important event in Scripture happened there. The area has been racked by violence lately. How do you restore safety and security for both Jews and Arabs?
Well, you don't restore it by being weak and vacillating. It doesn't help. You have to take an iron fist against terrorism wherever it comes from, and Judea and Samaria is no exception. On the contrary, and believe me, both Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians, welcome the return of calm. And I've had the good fortune, and I don't think it's accidental, of the 10 last years that I was in office, ending 2 years ago, were actually the most quiet and safest 10 decade in Israel's history. And it wasn't because I was soft and yielding. It was because I was not yielding, unyielding, and uncompromising, and acting strongly against the terrorists that torment us, and by the way, Palestinians too. So I think in many ways that's what's required, and that's what I intend to do.
Excellent. You know, the recent U.S. elections here continue to highlight how deeply divided America has become. How does that affect the international goals that you hope to achieve going forward?
Well, I have enough of our own politics. I won't go into yours, but I would say that in Israel, at least, across the political spectrum, people are united in their appreciation for America and the importance that America plays in Israel's national interests. It's what I call the indispensable ally. It's ultimately the protector of freedom. So I think through changing administrations here and in America, the alliance has been unshakable. And most Americans recognize that. Most Americans support Israel. A few on the radical fringe don't, but most Americans across a very broad political spectrum view Israel for what it is, this great ally of the United States, a fortress of freedom in the heart of the Middle East, which in a very large radius is not composed of democracies like Israel is. And so people understand that this is a plucky, courageous island of Western civilization. And the fortunate thing is that we now find allies within the Arab world who, while not being Democrats with a small d, they nonetheless would like to seize progress and not go back to medieval fundamentalism of the radical Islamists. So we forge new alliances based on that common interest, which has been up to now supported by America and should be supported by America continuously. As far as the democracies have their polarization, we in Israel have had a wrenching few years. Right. I think once you establish a government, you have to reach out across the aisle. In our case, aisles, because of
Right.
politics, more than two parties. But nevertheless, the nature of democracy is that you have you resolve conflict non-violently. You resolve it through argument, sometimes fierce argument and debate, but you settle it not with bullets, but in the ballot box. But arguments per se, people sort of lament all the time that democracies are, they are argumentative, that they're polarized. Yeah, they are. That's what it is. That's what it's about. If you don't have polarization, then you have a totalitarian state, which is what Iran is trying to be.
Right.
And the fact is that you see that the protest emerges from the concrete right up. It just bursts through the concrete. And it's fascinating to watch and something that I greatly respect and admire.